masterclass, basically the pre-MBA class, is on global citizenship, and that has been going to be taken by Professor Stephen Burton. So I am taking this opportunity, before we begin this class, to introduce him. So to start with, Professor Stephen Burton is an experienced executive with an extensive track record of success in higher education and corporate environments. He began his 15 plus years in higher education after a successful 20-year corporate career. Most recently, he served as the Executive Director, Center of Executive Education for the Indian School of Business, as we know it, ISB. There, he led a team of 50 professionals creating and delivering corporate executive development programs to over 5,000 participants annually. Prior to ISB, Professor Stephen was the managing director for the world's top executive MBA programs at INSEAD, where he oversaw a global team and a portfolio of programs across France, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, and Beijing. Dr. Burton received his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Texas A&M University, his MBA from the University of Texas at Austin, and his PhD in business general management from Singapore Management University. Welcome, Professor Burton. It is an honor to have you, amongst us all today. So we are looking forward to have a very fruitful session on global citizenship by you. So over to you, Professor. Thank you so much.
Risha, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I really appreciate it. And to all of the attendees at today's masterclass, thank you for welcoming me into your homes through this Zoom link. I am very excited to get to meet you, through this link, and I'm very excited to get to share with you. I have to flash back several years, but I can remember when I was sitting in your shoes, thinking about embarking on my MBA program. And what it was going to do for me and how it might change my life. And the results have far exceeded any of my expectations. I'm a bit jealous of where you're at today because you guys have the world ahead of you, and that's such a beautiful feeling. I'm not jealous because I know all of the uncertainty and the hard work that you're going to have to be doing throughout the next several months. So to that, stay focused on the goal. And stay committed to what brought you to this place to begin with. Like Rishal and Rahul had shared with you, this is on global citizenship. And I put together what I think are some ideas that hopefully you'll find valuable, but perhaps maybe some of the most valuable pieces of these sessions come during a Q&A. So while you're listening, please think of any ideas or questions that may come up for any of the UBS team here, and we'll do our best to assure that they're addressed most effectively. Give me just a second and I will share my screen with you if I can find the right one, share it. And I've developed a bit of a little presentation, and we'll go through this by the slides, and this should maybe take 20 to 30 minutes depending on how fast I talk. I've been told that I talk very fast, so I'm intentionally trying to slow down a little bit. So if there's things that I do talk too fast or that you miss on, don't hesitate to let me know. And we're in presentation mode. All right, so I had a little bit of an idea, but not too much direction. So being a global citizen, education and impact is what I've labeled it. And I'll kind of go through an agenda. What I want to do, I don't have a formal agenda on the slides, but what I want to do is tell you a little bit about my background to kind of give you the perspective that I'm coming from and some of my qualifications to talk about being a global citizen. Then I want to do is jump into what I consider to be my top 10 list of impacts from being a global citizen. And I'll talk a little more to that and how that might be different than what you're thinking about. It's not to dismiss any of the thoughts that you have about being a global citizen or global exposure, because they're all probably very valid. But I want to talk about kind of maybe a deeper meaning that global citizenship gave to me as a result of my MBA program. And then I want to just briefly go over what I consider to be some of the personal characteristics that propel someone or prepare someone or kind of vet someone to be a global citizen or help someone be successful as a global citizen. And then I want to jump into the role that education can play, because I know if done right and done with a good mindset, this MBA experience from a globally exposed school can do tremendous things for you. It will not be alone, standalone enough, and that we'll talk about some of the characteristics, but it will be a game changer potentially for you if you kind of have some of this insight and can jump and take it forward. So again, this is from my perspective, and feel free to think and jot down questions, and we'll bring them out towards the end. I hope we have some really good, engaging ones, and I'm happy to address as much as possible. So, my journey has been beyond any of my magical expectations going back several years. I literally grew up in a cotton patch in Texas in the USA. And when I say literally, it is literally. My house was surrounded by 3 sides of cotton fields growing. My dad farmed, and I was very rural. We lived outside of town. I was the first person to go to university from my family. And I grew up in Greenville, Texas. And then at the age of 19, I moved to College Station, Texas. Greenville, Texas is a town of about 25,000. College Station's about 4 times that, 100,000. There's a school there, Texas A&M. It's a state school, very large, very good in engineering, and pursued an engineering degree. That engineering degree opened up doors for me that I could not have begun to expect. And it was, to me, I think, still one of the most influential experiences in my life. Leaving College Station, I moved to Austin, Texas, about 2 hours away, and went to work for IBM. We'll talk about my work history in just on the next slide. But lived in Austin, Texas for about 2 decades. While in Austin, that's when I joined my MBA program, and I completed my MBA program while I was working full-time through an executive program in Austin. And I talk about A&M and my undergraduate being one of the biggest triggers professionally. My MBA from a school that has the exposure that the University of Texas did is really what opened up my life to being a global citizen. It made transformations that I, again, exceeded my wildest dreams and made things possible for me. From Austin, I moved to Karachi, Pakistan, which most people find, kind of crazy and wild. And I've got some fantastic stories that I can tell there. And lived in Karachi for about a year. And then I moved to Singapore and lived in Singapore for about 7 years. But while I was in Singapore, I had the chance to travel and quasi-live short-term at places in Europe and Middle East and even in China. After Singapore, I moved to India. And India had been intriguing, and I have tons of friends that I knew from India but didn't live in India. And again, at that point in my life, which is about 4 years back, still being awed and wowed as a learner about what the global environment and being a global citizen means. So from going to Austin, where I traveled quite a bit, to living in Karachi, living in Singapore, living in Hyderabad, and now back visiting in India, it's each day is just an amazing experience. And I really do, there's certainly inherent characteristics that I think I have that we'll talk about, I think, that are necessary. But really the MBA experience that I got from a globally focused school really was a game changer for me. Combining all of these that have places that I've lived and to where I have visited, it's probably close to 100 countries now. And each time I go somewhere, each time I live somewhere, each time I visit somewhere, it changes my mind a little bit, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little bit, but that global citizenship component of my life that resulted post-MBA for me just was probably what I consider to be one of the most impactful professional components. So where I've been, we talked about locations. Right after my undergraduate engineering degree, I worked for IBM for about 7 years. Got tired of the big company environment and went to a small company environment. In IBM, I was in Texas, to a company called MTS. Probably many of you don't know of it, but it was based in Texas, but traveling all over the USA. So I began to get the travel bug and understand what life was like outside of Texas and what life was like as a traveler. Took a back seat from MTS to pursue an entrepreneurial career. Part of that was so I could pursue my MBA. My job at MTS had me on the road traveling 40 weeks a year, 5 days a week, and it just didn't allow time to do an MBA. So I became an entrepreneur and pursued my MBA, had a very successful run for about 4 or 5 years. And then upon finishing my MBA, I joined the University of Texas, went into the academic world, and that's when I first started being part of higher education. The MBA combined with working at the University of Texas began my global citizenship. Got to travel to places I'd never thought possible, and then had the opportunity to move and to live in Pakistan, which then led me to move to Singapore, which then led me to move to a company called INSEAD, or a school called INSEAD, which gave me the opportunity to really live in Singapore, but effectively live in Paris, Abu Dhabi, and Beijing. And then to move to India. So that's kind of my background about where I've worked and what I have done, and the places I have had the opportunity to really spend deep time from a living perspective. The visiting perspective, like I said, it's close to 100, and we won't go into that. So what is being a global citizen? And I thought about this, and I think when most people think about it, at least in my first mindset, it was how exciting it was and how exotic it was, and kind of that whole jet set lifestyle. And that is interesting. It gets old after a while, but it is interesting. So keep that passion for that. But what I want to do is kind of go through what I consider to be a top 10 list of things that I think really are the benefits and the values that come from being a global citizen. First off, it's mind expanding. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I think about this like, you've probably seen the cartoon where the fish is underwater looking up outside of the water and not having any idea of what's on land or what's up in the air. That's what I was like in Texas. I didn't know what it was like until I started traveling. I kind of got a taste of it. I stuck my nose out, I got my eye up there, and I began to feel it. But living outside really I got out and I walked on land and I understood what the places were like. It really transformed how I thought about Texas, the US, and living abroad. And it was intimidating, it was scary, but it was amazingly fulfilling to expand my mind that way. If you think education expands your mind, which it does, go live abroad, go spend time in multiple countries and really imbibe yourself in that, and you'll find out what mind expanding really is. One of the most beautiful things is it dramatically increased my circle of friends. And not just circle of friends, but the variety and diversity of that circle of friends. On this particular trip, I still live in Texas right now, but on this trip, I've been to Singapore, to Thailand, to India, and a couple other places. In each place, when I get off the plane, I'm very comfortable going through the airport because I've been through that, dozens of times. But seeing my friends, it's nonstop social engagements that COVID has kept me from visiting. And I have friends that I talk to on a regular basis. And it's not just about having friends, but it's about having those rich discussions, those intellectual discussions, those academic discussions, those geopolitical discussions. And these friends really make that possible. And each place I've been, I've stayed with friends. So I've got friends where I can go crash at a room in their house, and they welcome me in. And having that is heartwarming, and it feels good. But it's also enriching in the types of thought process and discussions and challenges that we give to each other. Beyond friends, and it's similar to friends, but circle of colleagues. I have individuals that I've worked with and I can easily call on today that are in Paris, that are in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, that are in Beijing, that are in Wisconsin, California, Hyderabad, Mumbai, Singapore, and we can have discussions, or they can help me out on a project, or they will be a reference for a project I'm trying to work on, or they will call me and ask me to help them with the project or to be a reference for them. And to know that I can get that call, or that I can make that call and have that available at my fingertips is just part of that mind expanding experience that I didn't think about, but has been one of the gems of being a global citizen. Culture expanding. As a small town kid from Texas, I'd never heard of Diwali. I'd never heard of Holi. I'd never heard of Ramadan. I'd never heard of Eid. I'd never heard of Chinese New Year. I didn't know much about Muslim or Hindu or Sikhism. And now I'm shallow in my knowledge, but I know, and I can have conversations There's foods, there's languages, there's customs, how do you greet somebody, taking your shoes off at the door when you walk into a place in China or Singapore and possibly India. Those are all customs that I didn't, I had no exposure to. And I will tell you, I made tons of mistakes at the outset of this and did things wrong. But back to the circle of friends and circle of colleagues, they were mistakes, but these are friends and it's a friendly environment. And they, put their arm around me and they say, Stephen, here's how we do it here. And we'd appreciate it if you would, adhere to this. And I'm like, thank you for teaching me. I'm a better person as a result of this. And so culture expanding, these are some of the highlights, but it's much more than that even. Build respect. And this is, I think you'll probably think about this, and it goes two directions, okay? I have respect for, well, let me back up a little bit. Coming from the US and from where you're at, you probably see a very narrow view of a lot of places. You see what comes on the news, you see what you read, which is a very narrow view. If you've traveled to places as a tourist, you kind of see a very small part of it. But when you live in an area, when you become a global citizen, you begin to dig into some of the back pieces and begin to understand how pieces work and how people work and what people want. One of my first learnings going to Karachi, which all we see in the US is not terribly positive for Pakistan, but when I got to Karachi, my first realization was people are people. They want to do better by their family. They want to raise their children well. They want to grow themselves. Just the same things that I had wanted growing up in a small town in Texas. They want to do that. So they're not bad, but in the news, all I see is negative stuff. So now I have a tremendous level of respect and I approach them as peers and colleagues, like I had just said, and am much more embracing of what they are. Build respect from a personal point of view. When I start having these living experiences that I can talk to people about, they now have a new level of respect for me about, some of the things we'll talk about, being courageous, exposed to different cultures, having conversation that goes a lot broader than it used to. And so now I've gained a new level of respect because of that. And that was just tremendous for me. Professional enrichment, which I think is probably something that most of you think about. I've had, because I have become a global citizen, because I had certain experiences on my resume and I could tell certain stories, I became much more valuable in the marketplace. It was professionally much more enriching and provided much more opportunity than I've ever would have expected. And that was such a surprise to me. I thought, yeah, I'm gonna go live here, I'm gonna go do this. The way other people viewed that is that you're willing to take risks, you're courageous, you're ambitious, you're curious. These are things that we'll talk about. And it does demonstrate innate qualities in me that were there, but it demonstrates them more than just me saying, yes, I'm curious. They look at where I've been and they say, this guy demonstrates that he talks the talk, but he also walks the walk. And being a global citizen showed that I would do that. Taking a one-week trip to Vietnam is nice. Living in Karachi, Pakistan for a year certainly says a lot more about you. Personal enrichment, and I think this is what most of you are thinking about also in addition to the professional enrichment. Taking those risks, just like you're well aware of risk reward, there were rewards for doing that. Some of them are financial, some of them are career rewards, some of them are other rewards, but there are personal rewards that come with that. Some material rewards that's mostly what I focused on in the previous parts, but also just intangible rewards. How I feel at night, how I can go to sleep at night. Last night, having a conversation with colleagues, here in Karjat, just having those conversations and knowing that I'm sitting in a room talking to somebody who I never probably would have thought I'd had the opportunity, and we're discussing politics, we're discussing finance, we're discussing religion in a very beautiful, healthy way. And that's just, when I went to bed last night, I just felt, kind of still, even though I've lived abroad, been a global citizen for 12 years now, I'm just pinching myself thinking this can't be real. And just so personally, it is so fulfilling. And we chase titles, we chase money. Chasing experiences, to me, is the most rewarding part from a personal enrichment point of view. And professional. I talked about professional enrichment, making people value you more. I have opportunities that I never expected. I have calls coming in when I outreach to people. Doors are opened. Being a global citizen positions you substantially different in the eyes of, what you guys may be thinking about post-MBA recruiters or organizations. But if you're looking at starting up a business that positions you differently in front of people there, again, it's independence, it's courageous, it's curious. We'll talk about some of those qualities later, but those opportunities just went off the charts when I decided to move abroad. And as I deepened myself and expanded that global citizenship part. And then finally, I want to talk about what this allows you to do. So we've got these 8 things that we've talked about. Next, it increases your impact. As an MBA, you want to benefit yourself, but if you joined UBS, the first green business school in India, you want to have an impact on the world. And your ability to have an impact on the world with the increased opportunities, with the increased recognition, with the increased personal value, your ability to have an impact is going to be dramatically greater than you can imagine. You will have an impact regardless of what path you choose, but if you want to expand that impact, being a global citizen, knowing people abroad, having colleagues abroad, being able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody in Dubai or the US or London is going to instantly bring value and action to thoughts that you had. It's going to create ideas that you hadn't thought about through conversations with colleagues. As you get exposed and your mind expands, you're going to see things and it's going to think, I've got new ideas that are going to make an impact on the world. And it increases your ability to have an impact. And ultimately, that's a big reason why you chose UBS and why you're pursuing an MBA. And then ultimately, that's all towards creating a better world. I chased a lot of things early in my career. What's most important to me now is creating impact and creating a better world than I came into. If there's a small way I can do that, I want to do that. And being a global citizen has dramatically increased my ability to do that. I could have had an impact in Greenville, Texas on a cotton farm. I could do that. But having traveled the world and having a network of colleagues and having a network experience and having ideas that come from living and traveling all over have ratcheted up my ability to contribute. So why move one stone when you can, create a tool that'll move 1,000 stones? And I've created a tool with my global citizenship that allows me to move 1,000 stones, and those 1,000 stones from my direction are to create a better world. Corollary to this is I see a lot more problems in the world, and so I see a lot more challenges to be solved. I believe in education as a place to solve those, and so I'm pursuing education as a path. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're an investment person, if you're whatever you are, I see problems that need to be solved that I didn't see before. And so it gives me the ability to create a better world through that impact. All right, so what I've listed, I think, 8 or 10 of these, I didn't count them, of I think some basic requirements. And I think these are things that can be honed and built, but I think by applying and choosing UBS as a business school, as an MBA, these are things that probably you have already. Embracing change. If you're scared of change, global citizenship is going to be challenging for you. And not to say the first time you get on a plane or get off a plane in a strange new country that you shouldn't be worried. You got to be cautious, but embrace what you can learn from it versus, and what I saw some of my colleagues from the US do is they would get off a plane, they would go to a 5-star hotel that looked just like the one in Dallas or New York, and they would never leave that. That's not global citizenship. That is traveling, that's tourist. Okay, embrace change, go immerse yourself, go live, go be wherever you're going to be. I encourage you to travel, but even beyond traveling, I traveled quite a bit, but when I moved abroad, the first month abroad, I learned more than all of the trips I had taken before that. So embrace change. Be okay with uncertainty. Stuff is not going to work out like you think it's going to work out. You're going to have struggles, you're going to not be able to speak a language. The hotel's not going to be there. You're going to miss a flight. Somebody's going to rip you off at some point. Be okay with that uncertainty. Be safe, be cautious, but be okay with that uncertainty. And if you're not okay with that uncertainty, it's going to be a struggle. Be courageous. My first job, my first living experience outside the US was in Pakistan. One of the hardest phone calls I've had to make in my life is to tell my mom I'm going to Pakistan, because she was just broken up over that. But be courageous. I saw some things before I moved there that scared me to death, but I was confident from all of my sources and my colleagues and network that it was the right thing to do. Be smart and savvy. Smart is just, the ability to learn. Savvy is just, kind of street smarts. And maybe you got some of that. Maybe you need to adapt some of that. But embrace it and try and be as locally savvy as you can. You can get some of it out of a book, but really getting in and talking to the people and walking the streets and trying the food and doing things is going to make you more savvy. Be learned. The more you can know before you go there, the better off you're going to be. You're never going to know it all. Your MBA program, especially from a place like UBS, will dramatically up that learned capability. You should have inherent leadership skills, which by pursuing an MBA, you've demonstrated that you probably do. Because you're going to have to take initiatives and being courageous, like we talked about earlier. But having innate leadership skills. I think you've already demonstrated that by the program, but that's going to help you out. Take calculated risk. Again, me going to Pakistan is a calculated risk. Staying in some of the places I've stayed, trusting some people I've trusted, those things were risks, but they were calculated risk, and there's some didn't work out, but most of them worked out. Be very curious, go places you haven't been, listen to opportunities you may not have considered to be real, because if you say no without even listening to it, you're not curious, and it's probably going to shut you down. Resilient, like I said, you're going to get, you're going to have setbacks. Patient, you're going to have setbacks. So bounce back from them, and don't take them as a failure. Take them as a learning opportunity, and be open-minded about how you approach it next time. And then I've got a huge sense of humor. I laugh a lot. If you can't laugh, you're going to struggle traveling, and you're going to struggle living abroad. And so, be appropriately serious, but in the end, people like humor, have a good sense of humor, and demonstrate it, and use it as an ice-breaking tool when you meet people. So let's talk about education and how this will help you do. So you're joining UBS, and you're going to be, starting your MBA journey. It transformed your awareness. You're going to meet colleagues, and I saw you guys talking about starting a WhatsApp group. You have a new set of colleagues, and what you learn in the classroom and faculty and guest speakers and some of the experiences, it changes your awareness. You may not be the fish getting out of the water onto the land, but you're poking your eye out and you're beginning to see things and say, that looks interesting, I want to try that. It definitely expands your curiosity. You may be a naturally curious person, but when you're given new facts and new information and new frameworks, now you can be curious at another level. And that higher level curiosity will serve you very well. Education, a global education, opens up doors for you through people you meet, through credentials you achieve, through projects you work on, through companies you interface with. Doors are going to begin to open for you. Now, we talked about being action-oriented and being courageous and taking advantage of them. Opening a door, you need to walk in, okay? So opening a door is nice, but it's not sufficient, so take advantage of it. It provides you resources. So maybe you're not a global citizen immediately after. It took me a few years after my MBA before I went global, but you begin to build up some financial resources and some colleague resources that can help you network. So build up those resources to take advantage of them. And it creates tools and frameworks and skills that allows you to leverage the opportunities. So the doors are opening. Now I'm more capable of taking advantage of those. Expand your network. You've got a new network of classes, but you also have 2,000, 3,000 UBS alums. You've got corporates that you meet. Those network are now part of the opportunity. Opportunities are there, they created. Some of them may be right out of school. Some of them may be you join a company and then 2 years later, they want you to take an international assignment. Embrace that. Going through a global education system like UBS creates this thirst for learning. There's going to be painful parts of this journey, but you're going to enjoy who you are on the other side of this, and you're going to want to continue learning more. So it's going to create this desire to go off and learn more. You learn by traveling, you learn by reading, you learn by taking additional courses, you learn by talking to your colleagues, but it's going to create that thirst, and that thirst is really going to propel you. That's part of that curiosity drive that we talked about. And then finally, all of this creates an upward spiral. The more you do, the more opportunities come to you, the more opportunities come to you, the more resources you have, the more opportunities. So it's this beautiful upward spiral that really propels you into the next level. So my MBA from a school like Texas really made the difference for me to be a global citizen. And then my learning journey just begun. And here I am a couple of decades later, and I'm still on that ride.